Have you ever thought that some cities may be huge in terms of territory, but in practice they seem empty? And I'm not talking about small country towns with 5 or 6 houses and a gas station. I'm talking about municipalities with hundreds of thousands of inhabitants, some even approaching 1 million, but which, because they are so spread out, have a very low population density. In other words, lots of space and few people per square meter. Today, Bello Mundo is going to take you on a tour of 10 American cities that are huge in terms of area, but which totally escape the idea of a crowded metropolis. If you think that a big city always means crowds, you might want to rethink that concept. So, let's take a look at these places and find out where you can live without neighbors banging on the wall. Number 1. Aurora, Colorado. To start the list, we land in a place that has everything to be busy, but surprises with its emptiness. Aurora, Colorado. If you're into winter sports, majestic mountains, and the kind of scenery that people call outdoor paradise, this place is a must-see. Located east of Denver, Aurora stretches over a gigantic territory, which results in a relatively modest population density compared to other large cities. You know those cities that grow, expand, and suddenly seem too big for the number of people who actually live there? Well, Aurora is a great example of this. It has almost 380,000 inhabitants, which seems a lot at first glance. But there's a catch. They are spread over an area of more than 400 square kilometers. This means that Aurora has a very low population density by American standards, with wide streets, quiet neighborhoods, and lots of empty spaces. And it's not isolated in the middle of nowhere. Quite the opposite. Aurora is close to Denver, which means that many people live there but work in the state capital. The result is a city that looks big, but has that spacious suburban feel, with houses that have generous backyards and a spectacular view of the Rocky Mountains. And despite having a relatively busy urban center, the climate is much quieter than in other cities of a similar size. Number 2. New Orleans, Louisiana. Moving on to New Orleans, which needs no introduction, right? The birthplace of jazz, Mardi Gras, and a cuisine that mixes French, African, and Caribbean influences, this city breathes culture and history. The famous French Quarter is a real postcard, where jazz bars fill the streets and the stores exude aromas of authentic Cajun and Creole cuisine. But as well as music and food, New Orleans is also known for something darker: voodoo, ghosts, and urban legends that span the centuries. They say that, after Haiti, it is the second largest center of voodoo in the world. Many specialized houses keep this tradition alive, such as the iconic Reverend Zombie's House of Voodoo and the Marie Laveau House of Voodoo, which is more like a mini occult museum. Speaking of geography and population, New Orleans has a curious fact. The city has around 390,000 inhabitants, spread over a gigantic area that exceeds 430 square kilometers. This means a population density of approximately 889 inhabitants per square kilometer, a relatively low figure for a medium-sized city in the United States. Anyone who sees the French Quarter packed with tourists could swear that the whole city is an anthill. But when you leave the area, the scenery changes. Wide streets, vacant lots, and neighborhoods with few houses give an almost abandoned feeling. The city has around 390,000 inhabitants, spread over more than 430 square kilometers, resulting in a very low density by American standards. Much of this is due to Hurricane Katrina, which devastated the region in 2005. Many people left and never came back, leaving many areas empty. Add to this the fact that the city is full of dikes, canals, and areas below sea level, which greatly limits population growth. The result? A curious contrast. The historic center is pure animation, music, and movement, while a few minutes away, Deserted neighborhoods give the feeling of a ghost town. New Orleans is undoubtedly one of the most fascinating and storied places in the United States, both for the parties and the mysteries that lurk in the shadows. Number 3. Tucson, Arizona. Leaving the land of voodoo, we now land in Arizona, specifically in Tucson, the land of the blazing sun, giant cacti, and a landscape that looks like it's straight out of the Wild West. Tucson, one of the largest cities in the state, is home to approximately 550,000 inhabitants, spread over an immense area of 624 square kilometers. This results in a density of only 878 inhabitants per square kilometer, well below average for a city of this size. But why is Tucson so spacious? The secret lies in the urban style of the American Southwest. Instead of skyscrapers and overcrowded neighborhoods, the city spreads out horizontally, with many single-story houses and open spaces. The warm, dry climate also has an influence. Lower buildings, large backyards, and little verticalization are part of the way of life there. In addition, Tucson is surrounded by mountains and natural parks, which limits expansion in certain directions. Even with a strong university presence, thanks to the University of Arizona, the city has never experienced concentrated growth. On the contrary, new neighborhoods have sprung up far from the center, maintaining that big city characteristic, but without the feeling of overcrowding. For those who think that every city in the desert is cramped and full of skyscrapers like Las Vegas, Tucson proves otherwise. There, the wide streets and endless horizon are part of the scenery, reinforcing the idea that, in the southwest of the United States, space is at a premium. Number 4. Memphis, Tennessee. Continuing our journey, we now land in the south of the United States, more precisely in iconic Memphis, land of the blues, rock and roll, and, of course, Elvis Presley. The city has approximately 650,000 inhabitants, but its total area is gigantic, 770 square kilometers. As a result, the population density is around 847 inhabitants per square kilometer, which is surprisingly low for an urban center of this size. What explains this spacing? First of all, geography. Memphis grew up on the banks of the Mississippi River, which meant that its occupation was decentralized, dividing commercial, industrial, and residential areas. In addition, over the decades, the city has gone through periods of economic crisis and deindustrialization, which has resulted in some underused areas and even partially abandoned neighborhoods. But make no mistake, if you go to the famous Beale Street or visit Graceland Elvis's mansion, you'll find streets full of tourists and a thriving music scene. But when you move away from the center, things change. There are neighborhoods with large houses, quiet streets, and large empty spaces. Number 5. Tulsa, Oklahoma. Tulsa was once the oil capital of the world. At the beginning of the 20th century, the exploitation of this resource brought wealth and growth, transforming the city into a vibrant economic hub. But unlike other urban centers that have grown upwards, Tulsa has always maintained its sprawling identity, with large neighborhoods and lots of green areas. Today, the city has just over 400,000 inhabitants, spread over an immense territory of 510 square kilometers. This gives a density of just 786 inhabitants per square kilometer, well below the average for a city of this size. What helped Tulsa become so spacious? In addition to the occupation model based on houses with generous backyards, the city's history has also had an influence. One of the most striking events was the racial massacre of 1921, when the Greenwood district, known as Black Wall Street, was destroyed in a brutal attack. The neighborhood was one of the most prosperous business centers for the Black community in the United States. But after the massacre, many families never returned, and the city lost a chance to develop in a more dense and structured way. Over time, Tulsa has gone through ups and downs, but today it is trying to reinvent itself with investments in culture and entrepreneurship. Number 6. Virginia Beach, Virginia. When you say Virginia Beach, you immediately think of a beach full of tourists, hotels lined up along the waterfront, and restaurants serving seafood. But the truth is that the city goes far beyond the strip of sand and extends over a gigantic area. There are around 450,000 inhabitants, occupying 634 square kilometers. That means a density of only 710 inhabitants per square kilometer, a very small number. The main reason comes from a historic merger that annexed rural and suburban areas to the municipality, expanding its territory. In addition, the Hampton Roads region, where the city is located, is home to several military bases, which influences population distribution and prevents the urban space from being more compact. The result is an interesting contrast. On the one hand, the busy waterfront, packed with people in the summer. On the other, quiet neighborhoods, farms, and even areas of preserved forest. Visitors can choose between the hustle and bustle of the promenade or the calm of the more secluded parts, where the wide streets and spacious grounds make it feel like you're in another city. Number 7. Kansas City, Missouri. Now we come to Kansas City, a place synonymous with barbecue, music, and sports. If there's one thing this city does well, it's Kansas City barbecue-style smoked meat, famous in the United States for its sweet and spicy sauces and slow cooking, which leaves the meat juicy and full of flavor. As well as food, the city also has a strong tradition in jazz and blues, musical genres that have marked the identity of the American South and helped shape the American cultural scene. It's no coincidence that the city has museums and clubs dedicated to these styles, keeping its musical heritage alive. And when it comes to sport, the city isn't far behind either. Kansas City is home to the Chiefs, an NFL team that has won multiple Super Bowl titles, and the Royals, an MLB team that has won major trophies in the National League. But what few people know is that Kansas City is huge in size and sprawling in population. There are around 500,000 inhabitants, spread over 815 square kilometers. That gives a density of just 608 inhabitants per square kilometer. Pretty low for a city this size, don't you think? This is because Kansas City didn't grow in a compact way. It has incorporated neighborhoods, suburbs, and even countryside areas without ever becoming a jumble of high-rise buildings. Local culture boils in the downtown area, especially in the Power and Light District, a neighborhood known for its nightlife and musical events. But you only have to drive a few minutes to find quiet neighborhoods, huge parks, and almost deserted streets. It's worth remembering that there is also Kansas City in the state of Kansas, just across the border. But most of the population and area is in Missouri, so be careful not to confuse the two. Number 8. Nashville, Tennessee. Next stop, Nashville, the country music capital of the world, where Broadway is a veritable open-air stage, with bars and concert halls teeming with talent and aspiring singers. But Nashville isn't all music and neon. The city merged with Davidson County in the 1960s, creating an immense municipality of more than 1,230 square kilometers. Although its population exceeds 660,000, the territory is so large that the density is well below that of other large cities in the United States. The contrast is curious. While the center pulses with the music scene and the flow of tourists, The outskirts have spacious neighborhoods, green areas, and even semi-rural regions. You can have a house with a yard, raise a few animals, and still live in the capital of country music. In recent years, Nashville has grown rapidly, driven by tourism, the health sector, and renowned universities such as Vanderbilt. But even with this boom, the city has not become a suffocating agglomeration. It retains that unique characteristic of mixing bustling urban life and suburban tranquility in the same territory. Number 9. Jacksonville, Florida. If you think Miami or Orlando are the biggest cities in Florida, surprise. The real giant in terms of territory is Jacksonville. Since 1968, when the municipality was incorporated into Duval County, Jacksonville has become one of the largest cities in the United States. The population is approaching 1 million inhabitants, but spread over almost 1,936 square kilometers. The density is around 471 inhabitants per square kilometer. The city center is on the banks of the St. Johns River and even has skyscrapers and a growing corporate movement. But Jacksonville goes far beyond that. The city spans coastal areas such as Jacksonville Beach, suburban neighborhoods, and even rural areas inland. It is also home to several military bases, which adds another factor to its sprawling territorial configuration. For those who associate Florida only with Miami and theme parks, Jacksonville may come as a surprise. It's an interesting option for those looking for a balance between space, urban structure, and nature, without having to compete for every square meter with thousands of neighbors. Number 10. Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Coming to the end of our trip, we landed in Oklahoma City, or OKC as the locals call it. Despite being the state capital, the city has a gigantic territory exceeding 1,570 square kilometers. But with 655,000 inhabitants, the density is around 417 inhabitants per square kilometer, an incredibly low figure for a state capital. This can be traced back to the end of the 19th century, when the city emerged during the famous Land Rush, an event that attracted thousands of settlers in search of free land. Since then, OKC has grown in a decentralized way, expanding horizontally with large residential neighborhoods, farms, and industrial spaces. Today, the city mixes tradition and modernity. Downtown is Bricktown, a revitalized district full of bars, restaurants, and entertainment. The energy sector remains strong, with a focus on oil and natural gas, and of course, the city has also become a reference in sport, thanks to the Oklahoma City Thunder, an NBA team that has boosted the economy and local identity. If your dream is to live in a city that has a bit of everything, commerce, entertainment, top-level sports, but isn't a suffocating agglomeration either, Oklahoma City could be perfect. It's big enough to have several development centers, but not so dense that you feel like you're in a sardine can. But what about you? What do you think of these cities? Which one have you visited, or would you like to visit? Let us know in the comments and share the video with that friend who thinks a big city is always synonymous with crowds. If you're not already subscribed to Bello Mundo, take advantage of this and sign up now so you don't miss out on any of our upcoming adventures. Thank you very much for watching and see you next time.